Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the show, Motivation Mondays. If this is your first time here, get excited because we are going to talk about a few things that are going to help us potentially get unstuck. Okay, let's go ahead and shift a little bit of how we've been doing things. We are literally on week 10 of this. We've been at this for 10 weeks now, and it'd be interesting to see how some of you have taken the concepts and the ideas and the exercises we've discussed and how it's been applied, if at all, to your life. Because the concept we're going to talk about today is using the power of language to get unstuck. So over the course of the last 10 weeks, if you've taken the ideas and you've been inspired, but you found yourself getting stuck, today's a good day to actually start to participate. So how we're going to conduct some of these Fresh Start Mondays moving forward is ideally having you kind of step into on either participating more or start to take advantage of these concepts that have been changing people's lives. Because I had a chance, because of things are starting to open up right now, to reconnect in person actually with a lot of our students and clients, many of which are in the real estate field. And it's been exciting to hear that a lot of real estate agents are, their business is increasing. Things are opening up a little bit. Sales are going up. I have a few mortgage broker clients that are talking about how great the rates are right now. And the market's just, literally just waking up. And sometimes there's been droves of businesses that have been business that has been coming in to a lot of real estate agents over the last few weeks alone. I have a client who's an escrow company, and she's been busier than ever before. So there are those who are busy and there are those who are not. And what we want to talk about today is for those that aren't, or those that want to get busier, there are certain stuck points that we want to address, and we want to use language to do that. It's interesting because, so the question I want to ask as I talk about the next point is, for some of you, if you can go into the Q&A section and ask this question, if you feel that you are stuck, that you're looking the world around you start to open up, start to move forward, and you yourself are finding yourself still kind of stuck and haven't seen any progression ever since everything shut down back in March, kind of share within the Q&A so that you can get a little support around that later today when we do the Q&A. And so that way I can also see the mind of what I'm going to share with you as to where specifically you are stuck. Okay. If you are stuck, okay, just kind of share in the Q&A section where you're stuck. If you have been progressing, but you're not progressing as fast as you would like to, then share where you feel that the stuck point is that is actually keeping you from being able to progress as much as you would like. Okay. Now there is one of the biggest challenges, and even for me back in the day when I'm working on myself for personal development and personal growth, and I'm going to wanting to grow and wanting to evolve, one of my biggest stuck points was sharing in a forum or a platform or in a training or in a workshop my own personal desires and needs. And I justify it by saying, oh, other people are probably worse off than me, and so I'll let them ask the questions. I'll let them participate. And I would just sit in the back like I did growing up in academics and school and everything like that, and not get the full benefit of what was being taught or trained. So I highly encourage you to not be like me back in the day and not participate. So Shireen, of course, is there. She's saying not stuck, but not being resilient, which is, in one way or another, a form of being stuck, because if you're more resilient, then you'll probably be able to progress a little bit faster. Okay. So for the sake of today's conversation, let's say that is a form of a stuck point. Okay. How do you be more resilient? Okay, is the question. Okay. So let me share a little bit about someone that I reconnected with. So one of my students from way back has been a little quiet. And so I know he was dealing with some challenges. And so I reached out over the past few days, I think last week, didn't hear back from him for a little bit. And he actually finally responded last night. And he brought me up to speed of everything that was going on. He says, things were great. I was going through the program, was making a turn, and the year started off amazing. And then COVID happened. Okay. I said, okay, great. That's legitimate. COVID happened to the entire planet. And then I was interested to hear what he was going to say as, as the world became adapted to the whole COVID situation. And throughout the entire dialogue of him explaining what was going on, how great things were going to be, and how much momentum and how many results, how great the results he was having until COVID, everything around his conversation was hung up on the COVID reasoning of why things weren't happening for him. Now, the challenge I had with listening to that particular rhetoric and that dialogue was the reality of what I saw around me with the other students and other clients was not the same thing. And not even my own students and clients, and they're my peers and colleagues. There are those who obviously hung their entire hat and their business on the whole COVID and shifted their gears to focus on just that as being the reason. And there are those who pivoted, adapted, and became resilient and actually realized that there's a way to conduct their business, still serve at a high level without having to compromise their prosperity flow and their money flow. And so all the way to the end, he even ended with a statement about darn that COVID. Okay. And so I sat there and I thought about it. I was like, I wonder how many other people on this planet who have legitimate businesses that are out there designed to help others. Okay. Such as real estate agents are designed to kind of help people get into the most substantial investment in their life for many, or just being able to put a solid roof over their heads, or get the house of their dreams, right? Which is significant. It's not so much about the house, it's about the attainment of the dream. There's so many levels about just how powerful real estate agents are and what change and what impact they can make on somebody's life, that we sometimes forget that vision and get caught up in, oh my God, how am I going to survive? And that's exactly where this particular student was. He was absolutely in survival mode, and he forgot that he could actually get out of that by the simple structure of using language to create the leverage points to get out of that mud. Kind of like if you've ever gotten your car stuck in mud, or if you you realize that you needed something to kind of wedge between the tire and the mud that was not giving enough friction to be able to get the car out, and you need to pivot, you need to leverage. Okay, so in essence, what we're going to be talking about today is how language can be that pivot, that leverage to get you out of that stuck point. Okay, Joyce goes, mainly just procrastination, aka stuck. Yes. Okay, yeah. Procrastination is a big piece, because it is almost, procrastination in our culture is almost like an acceptable reasoning for being stuck, because it's such a widespread challenge to a point where, it's culturally and societally acceptable to say, yeah, I've been procrastinating. He's like, oh my God, I procrastinate too. Yay, misery loves company. Let's all procrastinate because it's okay, because it happens to all of us. And, as much as that kind of gives you that sense of relief, just recognize that it's also a way for us to continue to get stuck, because there's a comfort level where everybody else is procrastinating with you. And to some degree, it seems to be okay because it feels safer that way. When we venture out against the grain, away from the herd, sometimes that's what makes it challenging to do to begin with. So thank you for sharing that, Joyce. Elizabeth goes, I'm a new real estate agent and I'm progressing in learning the business, but I struggle with social media and marketing myself on social media because I am such a private person. Okay, cool. So yeah, that's absolutely a legitimate stuck point as well, because there are a lot of people who, and I think what's so great about the current set of circumstances is that a lot of us have been forced to embrace technology more, have been forced to dive in. And sometimes if you haven't been kind of slowly learning the ways of the new paradigm of marketing your business in this day and age with social media, when you're thrust into that and being forced having to do that, it could be a little overwhelming, which can then, from a unconscious safety standpoint, can have us stay in a stuck space, right? False sense of relief. Well said. Okay, thank you. I see that with the study. Okay, great. Okay, awesome. So great. Keep sharing because when we get to the Q&A, I want to address all of your all of what everybody that's sharing, and then we can we can talk about how we can use what I'm about to share to help get unstuck. Okay. So if you are taking notes, and if you have been taking notes, here are 3 words I want you to write down right now. And and these aren't uncommon words. These aren't SAT words. These aren't complicated words. And the 3 words that I want you to write down now are usually used in the form of a question. The first word is why. The second word is what. And the third word is how. Okay. I'm going to talk about why these words are so powerful, because we're going to first explain what these words actually do and what these words actually incite and where they actually are ideally used. Let's talk first about the word why, because that is the most common word that is used when it comes to questioning, when it comes to trying to seek answers to what we want in life, or how we can get unstuck. The challenge with the question why, it was most effective back when we were in school, when we were looking to understand specific concepts. So why is this happening? Why does this work? Okay. From an academic standpoint, the word why is, and even from a business standpoint, when you're learning new concepts that are like around strategy or tactics, the word why is a fantastic word to use, because it helps you be able to kind of truly understand the concepts. Now, where we get stuck is when we start to use that in the area of personal growth and personal development. Okay, so this is purely in the area, in the context of personal development and personal growth. So what I want you to do, if you're writing this down, okay, is remember this moniker as it pertains to your own internal work in working on getting motivated, and working on getting yourself excited about something, and working to getting yourself to understand what is going on underneath that is keeping you from getting to where you want to go. And that question, or that phrase of understanding is, and it's easy to remember, why makes you lie. Okay, so go ahead and write that down. Why makes you lie in the context of personal development and personal growth. And it's important to make that distinction, because I taught this to a lot of my students and clients, and they stop asking why altogether. They're like, no. You can ask why. You can answer the question why. It's just within the context of your own personal self, your own neurology, your unconscious behavior patterns, your programs. When you ask yourself, or anybody else, I mean, why are you doing this? Why are you behaving this way? And the reality is this, is that if the unconscious mind, or if that person or even yourself knew why you were behaving in a way that was undesirable, you wouldn't be behaving that way to begin with. And so what happens is, and we see this all the time when we ask little kids, if you ask a kid, why are you doing that? And they'll sit there and their eyes will dart around, because they don't know the answer. They don't know why. They just did it on an unconscious level. And then they'll just make up some excuse and some reason why they did it. And you're like, why are you lying? It's like, they don't even know why. They just said it because they didn't want to get in trouble. You know, a lot of times when we ask ourselves why about an uncomfortable subject, the mind seeks and searches for a way to avoid the pain, to get away from that uncomfortable circumstance of having to answer a question that they don't have an answer to. So similarly, if you are in a stuck point and you find yourself wanting to say, why am I doing this? Why am I stuck? Why am I procrastinating? Why am I not being resilient? That is actually one of the questions that can facilitate us staying stuck, because we actually don't know. It actually is a premature question, and it shouldn't be the first question, yet that is the first question we go to. So why makes you lie to yourself and others when being posed that question about behavior patterns that are just kind of unconscious? Okay, so just remember that. Now, before we talk about when we want to ask that, okay, let's talk about the next word, which is what. Okay, the power of what, it actually introduces higher level of detail to what is actually going on. I love using the term, what specifically does that mean? What specifically is the problem? The word what actually then is designed, if used properly, to pull the nebulous nature of what we don't understand out of the ether. It is actually designed to pull it out of the ether of vagueness into clarity. So the word what is is a powerful word to help you get more detail of what is actually going on. See, before we can make a change, we need to eventually get to a point where we answer the question why. But before we answer the question why, we need to pull the challenge and the out of the unconscious mind, which is the ether of nebulousness, and what to find out what specifically is the problem, what specifically is the stuck point. Okay, before we can even fix it, we need to know what we're actually wanting to fix. So that's why one of the things that you want to utilize the word for, and this is a question that you want to ask, you want to use over and over again, is you don't take the word uses that you're using to describe what the problem for granted, and you want to get as much clarity as possible. So that, say, for example, if you're saying the problem is I procrastinate, as an example, okay, then you want to kind of expound on that meaning, because everybody has a unique way of procrastinating. Okay. And one of the ways to do it is to define the terms. That's a phrase that we use all the time in the area of change work, is we don't take the language choice that every individual has for granted that we know exactly what they mean. So we use the word what along with a series of questions around what to bring clarity to what is actually being said. So if, for example, procrastination is a problem, is what specifically do you mean? Okay. What does procrastination actually mean to you? What does that look like? Okay. What is procrastination? Okay. But if you use, so what specifically, and then fill in the blank. Okay. So if you want to start doing this for yourself, to very powerfully use language in a conversation with self to start pulling, to get unstuck from that mud and use that leverage point, what is the first plank or 2x4 that you would jam in there to wedge between the tire and the mud of stuckness, as a way to kind of like stop the wheel spinning, to say, what exactly are we spinning our wheels in? So what specifically, and then fill in the blank. What specifically do you mean? What specifically is the problem? What specifically is keeping you stuck? Okay. So I love those of you who shared already. You've already picked what we call analogical markers, which is specific stuck points. Resilience, great. That's very specific. Procrastination, great. That's very specific. Okay. Struggle with social media marketing myself. Okay, so from there, those are very big buckets. For example, Elizabeth shares social media and marketing myself on social, because I am such a private person. So there are layers to that one. There's challenge around social media marketing. So what you want to say, what specifically around social media is the struggle? What specifically around marketing yourself is the struggle? What specifically is the problem with you being a private person and marketing? When you start to do that, you're going to start to kind of move into this awareness of, you're going to get more clarity, okay? Awareness and clarity around what the problem actually is. When you get as much of that clear as possible, then you move to the third word, which is how. How has been taught to us colloquially and through the academic system and just through language alone. How is a very powerful word, in that it tells your unconscious mind to immediately start to deconstruct whatever you say after that. Because when we grew up, we used the word how to learn something. And usually, if taught by a good teacher, the how then is followed by a step-by-step process, or a system, or a solution that is, an ABC, DEF, XYZ, a paint by numbers, whatever it may be. How then encourage the unconscious mind to start to deconstruct what the word what revealed, what the problem actually is. So asking yourself how is the next step after the what. So when you ask how, it tells the mind, okay, go into deconstruct mode, and you start to look at how things are actually done. The word how is a powerful tool and has been used in a variety of different levels. One of my favorite words to use is how, when it comes to doing deep change work. I had a client who was struggling from depression, and he came in and he goes, yeah, I was totally depressed today. And I looked at him and I said, so are you coming to me for depression? He goes, yeah, I want to get rid of my depression. I said, well, how do you do that? He goes, what do you mean? I said, no, I mean, bear with me for a moment. How do you do depression? Because everybody does depression differently. Depression is one of those nebulous terms that we just kind of like slap on as a big label for us, a collection of behavior patterns. It's like, oh, you must be depressed. And that's what happens in the world of psychology. They literally have a book that says these are the symptoms, and if enough symptoms are hit, then this is the label that you give them. I'm more interested in how those symptoms uniquely has the client or the student assign a label to their grouping of behavior patterns. And so how then starts to deconstruct that. And he sits there and goes, well, I never thought of it that way. Well, can we think about that? And he goes, okay. Immediately, as he started to think about how he does depression, his whole entire physiology actually already started to relax. He was able to disassociate from the owning of depression that he had in that moment, that he needed to put on a set of behavior patterns to portray a sense of depression. But when I asked him about how he actually was able to, on an unconscious level, step away from that state for just a brief moment to explain to me and literally teach me how he actually creates this problem, how he actually creates depression. So he was talking about how he would wake up in the morning and he would get out of bed and then do all these same things would happen. Then he says, and then I'm depressed. And I said, okay, great. So when you first wait, and this is me dissecting it all, and this is something that you want to think about if you are going to be using this to help get unstuck, is that you want to stop at every sequence and question yourself, is this where you get stuck? So he would wake up. I said, so if you were to teach me how to get depressed like you, okay, this is me talking to that client. When I wake up in the morning, am I depressed? He goes, well, no. I said, okay, great. So the next step is when I wake up and I lay around bed all day and I don't get out of bed, then do I get depressed? He goes, sometimes. Oh, okay. But sometimes not? He goes, well, no. I say, so if I wake up and stay in bed all day and lays around, don't do anything, does that mean I'm depressed? And he goes, well, no. Okay. Is there something I should be thinking about? He goes, oh yeah, you should be thinking about this. And now he's teaching me on how to be depressed. So what are the ways that you can help get unstuck is maybe partner up with somebody who's been on here consistently and maybe, become accountability partners in these Motivation Mondays. And it doesn't hurt to have peers in your world to kind of help cheer each other on, because that's what I love about community. And if you're not part of a community already as a real estate agent with peers and colleagues who can be there from a human standpoint and support each other, I highly encourage that, because at the end of the day, we are social beings. And even though we're private, we can surround ourselves with a bunch of people who are similarly private, and every once in a while we'll connect. But the point is this, is that maybe get together with somebody and have them, if you're stuck, see if you can teach someone else to get to a stuck point like you, to be stuck like you. Now someone said, well, why would I want to teach somebody to be stuck like me? No, because in the process, you will understand how to get unstuck, which then the other person can probably help you understand that as well, because they're being taught it and they will question it. And pretty soon you'll start questioning your own process of being stuck, which then allows you to interrupt that pattern of stuckness. Okay, I know this is a lot right now, but hopefully that kind of makes sense. Okay, so to summarize, what we did was we talked about the three powerful words of language that can help us get unstuck, the three starting points: why, what, how. What I want to talk about right now is to talk about the sequence. Even though I talked about why first, the reason why I talked about that first, because that's where most people go to start to create change. They go, why is this happening to me? Why am I doing this? Why am I procrastinating? Why am I not being resilient? Why am I not adapting? Why is everybody doing that and I'm not? Why is everybody doing better than I'm not? Okay. When we start at why, that actually perpetuates or makes it harder to get unstuck. The appropriate sequence is first to ask what, then ask how, then you can answer the question why. Because the reality is the why question will actually present itself. It will give you, once you have an understanding of what you're being stuck with and how to get unstuck, then you'll understand why you were stuck to begin with, if that makes sense. Okay. Once you answer those questions of what, how, and why, Then you take action. Then you employ the strategies of change. Then you move forward and just start to apply the strategies, the marketing strategies, the tactics and everything without the speed bump there. I often like to describe those that want to drive 100 miles an hour, learn how to drive 100 miles an hour first, and forget that there is a parking boot on their wheel. And so, no matter how good you learn how to drive 100 miles an hour, how good you are at marketing, if there is a boot on your car, you're still not going to drive 100 miles an hour, no matter how good you are at driving at 100 miles an hour. Okay? And that boot, it can be unstuck and unlocked by using just these three powerful words of what, how, and why. Okay. So I can give you more examples of how what is used and how is used, and then how it answers the question why. But I think a much better way would be if you guys who are listening can post in the Q&A box, specific stuck points that you would like to experience a little bit of, the what and the how and the why. Okay. Florita says, not too comfortable with technology, starting to ask for help. Great. Okay. So what I would say for Florida, for example, I mean, how many of you can appreciate what Florida is being challenged with, not being too comfortable with technology? If you can relate to what Florida is saying, put a 1 in there. If you have become more comfortable as a result of this whole pandemic, because you've been forced to do that, then press 2 to kind of celebrate that you are that. But 1, if you can relate to what Florida is saying when it comes to comfortable with technology. 2, if you've taken advantage of what's been going on right now to do that, to actually get out of that. Okay, so if you see that, Florida, you are not alone. Okay, so let's talk about, Florida's statement about not too comfortable with technology. So what I would do is I would start with the what, okay? What specific technology are you referring to, and what specifically about the technology makes you uncomfortable? Okay, so Florida, if you're taking notes, write those questions down and explore that and answer that. What specific technology are you referring to? Okay, and then what specifically about the technology is making you uncomfortable? Okay, what you'll find, and I was exploring years ago about creating a specific program just to help people get over tech phobia. We call it tech phobia. And when I was kind of doing a test market with a small group of people, I found that most of the time it had nothing to do with tech. It had to do with some internal self-confidence challenges that once we broke past, boom, technology was not a problem. Technology was just a scapegoat for a deeper issue. But that being said, Florida, so ask about what specific technology is actually creating that uncomfortableness, and what specifically about that technology is making you uncomfortable. And then from there, you can continue to ask the what question as much as you can. And then when you want to deconstruct the behavior that you identify, oh, that's the behavior piece, that's the problem, then how do you do that? How specifically did you make that into a problem? How does your mind make that? What is a sequence that ultimately has your mind attaching a label to it saying, yes, that's the problem? Okay. Shireen goes, but I can still relate because I feel like I am wasting time when puttering online. Right. Yeah, I mean, researching and getting into technology could absolutely be a time vortex. I get caught in that a lot. And what I do to satisfy that is just make a bunch of money and then buy more technology so I can play with it in person. But anyway, that's my solution to things. So let's go back to a few other things. So keep putting the questions in here in terms of if you would like a little support around stuck states. And what we'll do is we'll use the what, how, and why to help you get to some clarity around how to get out of that stuck state, okay? Going back to, say, for example, Elizabeth, okay, and she's not, I know for a fact that she's not alone in this as well, the struggle with social media and marketing self. Now, we started going into that a little bit earlier as an example, Okay. Social media, there's a lot of different types of social media. So you might want to ask what specific platform is giving you the most struggle? Is it all of them, or is it a simple one? And then what specific social media platform do you want to get better at? Okay. What is and so then you go to marketing myself. Okay. What types of marketing are you referring to? What kind of marketing, what specific type of marketing would you like to be able to not have a struggle with? Okay. Marketing myself on social media because I am such a private person. What specifically do you mean you're a private person? Okay, you want to ask yourself that. And the reason why you want to ask yourself that and not feel like you have to answer to anybody else, especially if you're a private person, it's about taking ownership of how you define yourself as a private person. Okay, what does a private person mean to you? Okay. I have a variety of different definitions in my mind on what a private person is. My dad was a very private person. But it wasn't like he didn't communicate with the world. When he went out, he was quite a charming guy. You know, when we go to the restaurant, he would always be, flirting with the waitresses and everything like that. So he didn't seem very private then. But how I define him as being private is that he would go to work all day. He would come home, do his familial needs in terms of eating dinner with the family and having, answering a few questions with the kids and stuff like that. But he would always then retreat to his room to do his work on his computer, to do his work on whatever he was doing in the room. I mean, there were times where I thought my dad was a total hermit, and yet there are times he totally wasn't. I mean, just recently, I went to dinner with him, I think end of last year before this all happened. And, we were out at a Japanese restaurant, had a couple drinks, and we were talking about, history, and he started finding out where the waitress came from Japan. And we started talking about that region. I was getting educated because my dad knew all about that region. I had no idea. And in that moment, he didn't seem like a very private person. So the importance and the point I'm trying to make here is everybody has a unique definition with the words that we chose to describe our problem, to describe our challenge. And one of the first steps of getting unstuck is to define the terms, define how you are how you define the language that you're using to describe the stuck state. Okay. Until you define it, then you can't get to the how, to understand how do you actually get to a point where then you're stuck using these terms of understanding. Okay. So it's what and it's how. Okay. Again, these are specific techniques that we actually use every single day for our students and our clients. So I'm giving you guys these tools to immediately apply this week if you feel like you're getting stuck or you're being stuck. Okay. Is there anybody else as I scroll up and see some more here? Okay, so Shireen also said, not stuck but not being resilient, which is you're being stuck and not being resilient. So what specifically do you mean by resilient? Okay, what is it that will define resiliency for you? Okay, what does resiliency look like in your world right now? Okay. Once you define that, then you go, okay, cool. How does that definition, how does that then create a stuck state for me? Okay. Susan goes, I never think I know enough to do this job. I am not a born salesperson. Okay. Years ago, actually one of my first workshops ever done back in 24 years ago was called The Art of Selling Without Selling. Okay. And the art of selling without selling was specifically designed for people who never thought they were salespeople. Because the reality is that the most prolific and the most amazing salespeople in the world were not those people from the 80s who would twist your arm and basically pressure the sale, were the ones who were the most authentic and most congruent. In other words, what I conveyed 24 years ago was that everybody's a salesperson, but everybody's a unique salesperson. And you know what? At the end of the day, when someone buys from you, they're not buying what you're selling, they're buying you. They like you. And that's why rapport is such an important component of what that's all about, which is true sales. Authentic sales is not about being a salesperson with sales tactics. Okay, is the art of selling without selling, which is the art of being you. The art of being congruent and being authentic and being clear with why you're actually in front of that client right now. Okay. That, okay, is what creates the best salesman in the world. Okay. From that particular training, we every single person that participated in that training became a form of salesperson that they were comfortable with, that they enjoyed. And so when I work with students and clients that are real estate agents, I said, okay, great. Everybody has their unique niche. Okay. For those of you who have attended the live sessions I've done at South Bay Association of Realtors, one of the first things I encourage the new agents to embrace is that to start to explore and ask the question that everybody has a unique niche within real estate. Everybody has a unique approach. And if you're brand new, you don't have to worry so much about, there's so much competition, there's so many competitors out there. It's to, how do I carve my own unique way of doing real estate that works for me, that works for my audience? Okay. The minute we try to get caught up and we want to sell to everybody, that's the minute that we kind of lose as a salesperson. So Susan, it's not so much you're not a born salesperson. All we have to do is help you understand what kind of salesperson you are. And that is derived from understanding self, the art of understanding self and being confident with what it is that you do and why you actually want to do real estate, why you want to take care of that client to begin with. You start to become more clear on that, on what specifically that is. That's when sales becomes easy, because all you're then doing is showing up and serving those that you know resonate with you. Okay. And that's kind of why most people move to just doing sales strategies, because it's not the easiest thing in the world. It's a simple concept, but it's not easy because it requires you to get intimate with yourself. So here's a couple stuck points for Susan right here. I never think I know enough to do this job. Okay. So that's a stuck point. There is a perception that it's never enough, that you never know enough. Okay. So what specifically, so this is the question you want to ask yourself for homework. What specifically do you mean? Well, what specifically does it mean to be enough, to know enough? What does that look like when you know enough? Okay. And the question I ask is, I never think I know enough to do this job. Now, has that question ever come up in other jobs, in other positions, in other roles that you played in life? The concept of never. See, well, for me, the flag of universal quantifiers, and what universal quantifiers are: never, always, none, very absolute, because the question that those terms, more often than not, help us delete, distort, and generalize actual truths that will actually keep you from saying, I never think. There may be times when you're sitting there answering questions for your clients where you realize, oh my God, I actually know more than I thought I knew. And this client is totally satisfied with the knowledge that I have about real estate, and I'm sharing this with them. Okay. So the never is to perpetuate, more often than not, an internal program or story. So if you want to dissect that, you want to say, if I never know enough, what does that then mean? Okay. So now we're using what again? Okay. And then if you want to go beyond that, is how does choosing to apply never as a truth keep me stuck? What specifically does it serve? Okay. Because every time we hold on to a particular behavior or a pattern or stuck point, it's to serve a particular belief that is deep inside of us. Otherwise, we wouldn't keep behaving a certain way. There is what we call, like I said before, weeks ago, or maybe last week, secondary gain. Okay, there is a primary desire that we have for doing what it is that we do every single day. And then the stuck points are serving a secondary desire that is unconscious. And that secondary desire is typically a deep down limiting belief that keeps us stuck. Okay. So I am not a born salesperson. What you want to do with that, Susan, is to ask yourself, what specifically do I mean by a salesperson? What is a salesperson? What is it? What is the definition of a salesperson to me? How do I know then that, how does that definition of a salesperson keep me stuck? because how you're defining salesperson may be a complete opposite of the type of salesperson you actually are. Okay, so that's something to explore. Okay, again, play with this. I'm introducing possible questions, okay, guidance for questions, and it's up to you to actually explore and play with the concepts of the what and the how so that you can answer the why. Okay. Let's see. Elizabeth has already been doing it. She goes, specifically about me being a private person is, for example, having to post organic photos and stories. The images of me and my kids around the pool on a Sunday afternoon. People want to get to know you intimately. Cool. That is one way. Okay. Organic photos and stories. That is one way to do it. I personally don't post too many personal images. I like to post sunsets and I like to do lives, okay, which is another way, okay? And if you're not comfortable doing lives, then what a lot of people have been doing, they take their headshots or they take pretty backgrounds, okay? I remember seeing somebody who loved art, who loved to create art, who loved to take photos, and they would literally take photos that they take of nature and then add their own quote to it, okay, and then in the description below they talk about where they took that photo, why they liked that photo, and then what it inspired them. And that was a way for their audience to get to know them intimately. Okay, so just because someone is comfortable sharing their home life, their family life, their kid life, doesn't mean that that's the only way that that's going to work. Doesn't mean that's the only strategy. That just means that's what that particular salesperson is comfortable with, or that particular real estate agent is comfortable with. Okay. So Elizabeth, you can find your own unique way of personal expression without compromising your value system of privacy. Okay. Because there's nothing wrong with being private. You don't have to do it the way that other people do it. There are people who are just as successful without sharing their family life. Okay. I share about my dog, I share about me, and that's about it. And every once in a while during these live sessions, I'll talk about family members, but in terms of posting pictures and everything like that, not too much. Okay. So those are great. That's a great share. Susan say, I think I'm putting up this barrier. I find myself becoming more of an educator than a salesperson. Okay. And you know what? Here's the thing. Most of the time when I'm having a sales conversation with someone who is considering a one-on-one conversation with either me or one of our coaches, or someone who wants to consider joining our Prosperity Breakthrough program, what happens is most of the call is me just sharing a ton of information, me educating, me teaching, okay? Teaching in a way, and here's the fine-tuning piece. When I realized that I love to teach, that I love to share everything that I learned in life and more to as many people as possible, one of the traps that I got into was I stopped thinking about sales, and sales wasn't happening. So what I needed to learn was, how do I teach and sell at the same time in a way that is congruent, in a way that's authentic, in a way that doesn't seem weird and funky. Okay? And that was my journey in terms of understanding what I want to do, because I didn't want to do the typical sales tactics and all these different things to try to get people to do it. I'm not attached, okay, to whether or not people say yes or no to what it is that I'm offering. Because I believe so much in that what it is that I do, that I'll teach as much as I can to a point. And if it gets to a point where if I teach anymore, and that's the big thing, find those who are teacher salespeople, is that you want to find a fine line between teaching too much or teaching just enough so that people understand there's more that requires a little bit more of a commitment. Okay. And the easiest way to commit to something so that you tell your unconscious mind that, yes, we are going to learn this, is through money. I mean, it's putting skin in the game. Okay. People think that money is the hardest thing to do. Money is actually the easiest way to get your unconscious mind to commit in this world that we live in. And when we recognize that, then we say, well, great. If I really want to do this, the fastest way, I see money, for me, in our world, we see money as a lubricant, as a facilitator to getting us what we actually do want anyway. It's when we start to use money to get what we don't want, that's when we start to start to break our relationship or devolve our relationship with money. Okay? We're doing it because we have to. We spend money because we have to, and those types of things, without recognizing that we're choosing to do so. So yeah, so for you, Susan, becoming more of an educator than salesperson, then what that sounds like, Susan, is potentially you are of the same ilk as me, which is a teaching salesperson, a salesperson that doesn't actually sell, but sells through their generosity of wanting to teach and share as much as possible so that the client and the customer can make the best educated decision. I have pushed potential clients and students to so many different other peers and colleagues that I think are a better fit. I tell people all the time, I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but those who are willing to do it, oh, we will go, we'll be like family. Okay. But when it comes to certain people, I was like, you know what? I think I have somebody that would be a much better resource for you. And I'm not afraid to teach them about that person and then share my resource with that person that can actually take care of them better than I can. Okay. I've actually had a few real estate clients that said this, I'm not the agent for you, but I think I know who would actually be a better fit. It was an older real estate agent, and he was working with a very young millennial that was working at SpaceX and came into a lot of money because he was recruited out of college and wanted to immediately get into real estate, but he was much older, and there was a lot of things that he just didn't understand in terms of the perspective that the young client brought to the table. So he's been in the business for a while, and he, instead of saying, okay, well, I'll figure it out, he goes, you know what, let me refer you to a couple of girls that are a little bit older than you, but they totally understand what your needs are and totally understand what you're looking for and can completely relate to all the technology that you want to use to stay in contact. And he made that referral. What was interesting was that when he did that, and I don't know if it was coincidence or not, the two younger agents, they actually said, we were just about to give you a referral of someone that we couldn't understand because they're much older and they've been in the game a lot longer. And quite frankly, we were a little bit intimidated. So we said, hey, we have something that you should probably talk to. And this is the world that we actually live in right now. It's no longer more about competition. It's a collaborative marketplace. There's plenty of business to be had out there. And if the perception that there's not enough business to go around is completely a misnomer, it's a stuck point. So you might ask yourself the what and the how of that to get the why that's keeping you stuck. Okay. But anyway, so Susan, to answer your question, to help you kind of explore that, okay, what is it? What's the distinction between educator and salesperson? What has you thinking that an educator can't be a salesperson and a salesperson can't be an educator, when in fact most salespeople, good salespeople, are one and the same. You have to be able to educate your audience and your client to some degree before they can make an educated decision. Salesperson doesn't make the decision for the client or the customer. The salesperson actually educates the client, encourages the client to make the best educated decision, and then steps back and allows the client to do so. That is the art of selling without selling, if you are in fact a teacher salesperson. Okay. So thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. Shireen goes, continuing despite obstacles. Okay. So continuing despite obstacles is a stuck point that a lot of people actually share. So how do I continue despite obstacles? And the first question I always ask is, what obstacles are you talking about? What specifically are the obstacles that are keeping you from continuing? Okay, answer that question, and then you start to expound on those answers and get as much detail as possible. Will start to lead you into, okay, well, how are these obstacles that you've defined are actually keeping you stuck or keeping you from continuing? So you go back to the what and how, you go back and forth enough, pretty soon the why will just reveal itself, and you're like, oh, okay, well, this is why I'm stuck, and this is what I need to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. Okay. When you get to a point where you can answer the question why first, and then it leads right into the what and right into the how, that means you've done enough of the what and the how, the discovery, like an archaeologist finding a knuckle and then opening up and saying, oh my God, that's a Tyrannosaurus Rex, right? Or that's a Brontosaurus. Okay. You do the what and the how to reveal as much as possible. So then the why just naturally falls from the back to the front. Then you ask the question, you can answer the question, this is why I'm stuck, and this is what I'm stuck on, and this is how I'm going to get unstuck. That's when you know that you've done enough of this work to get to where you want to go. Okay. Interruptions in schedule, so I have to take preemptory action to be able to get right back on track. Okay. What specific interruptions are you referring to? What specifically is an interruption and what is not an interruption? Sometimes exploring the what it is and what it isn't is also another way to get the whole entire picture. Okay. Deborah goes, how does a realtor who works solo stand out from that of a team? Okay. Okay. So yeah, so there are different types of realtors out there. Okay. And I've had clients in both areas. Okay. There are realtors who are absolutely amazing lone wolf realtors and stuff like that. And they inspire the world and those around them because they're such an amazing one-man show. And there are those who work better as a team. And so if you identify yourself as a solo realtor and you actually prefer being a solo realtor, what specifically is the difference? What specifically is the problem that you're seeing, that that distinction between solo and a team? Because there are benefits to both. And I think the question is, how does it really stand out? There is an assumption that the solo realtor may or may not have uh, ease in standing out versus a team that can actually kind of work together. Okay. So what specifically, okay, what is the best way to start a team? Okay, well, that's a different question. Okay, so what is the best way to start a team? One of the best ways to start a team is to identify where your strengths and weaknesses are. And what you want to start doing is to developing. A lot of times people make the mistake of partnering up, aligning themselves with someone who's exactly like them. And therein lies a challenge, because it eventually is going to be a loggerhead moment where you guys are butting heads because you are both exactly the same. You know, this is why my mom and I butt heads all the time, because we are very similar in personality, and you would think that we would get along. And when my mom and I get along, we get along fantastically. When we don't get along, oh my God, it's a nightmare. Okay. It's because if you're too similar, then you start to bump heads all the time. And so there's a misnomer out there that when you find and you align yourself with somebody, you should be aligning yourself with someone who is exactly like you. No, you should share similar values. You should share similar perceptions, but there should be very clear distinction of where each of your strengths and weaknesses are, and kind of like a Lego piece, how you guys kind of fit together and make the ideal team. Okay, so when we've helped real estate agents from on a corporate side that want to make teams, what we did was we would sit there and work on every single individual and identify what their strengths and weaknesses are, and identify what type of individuals you would have an ideal kind of a match with. And so what you want to start with before you start to look for team members is to say, okay, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What is it that I love to do when it comes to real estate? So for example, we got two people who partnered up together. One was love doing the behind the scene, love doing the paperwork, love making sure all the I's were dotted and T's were crossed. The other person, not so much. And they love being out in the field. They love going to knock on doors. They love doing all that stuff. And when we match them up, there's like, oh my God, this is a match made in heaven, because they both wanted to serve the client at the highest level and in the same way. They just both have propensities in two different areas of the process of doing real estate. And it became a fantastic union. And I think they're still together to this day. Okay. So when it comes to that, the first thing you want to do, Deborah, is to find out what specifically your strengths are, what are your weaknesses, and then what are the areas of real estate that you absolutely love to do, and what are the areas that you don't love to do. And then then you can start to look for people who kind of fill in those gaps. Okay. Maybe find someone who doesn't love what you love, but knows it's something that they need to do. What they view as a necessary evil, you thrive in all day. That is an ideal union. And then you also want to define why you're doing what you're doing, and what are your philosophies and what are your value systems when it comes to doing real estate and working with clients. Like if you come with somebody who ethics is not something they consider, they'll do whatever it takes to close the deal, then that may not be, and you have strong ethics, then that may not be something that you want to somebody you want to align with. Okay. So anyway, wow. Okay, yeah, we basically run out of time. So this is what I enjoy. I mean, the being able to kind of like curate specific solutions or strategies for those of you who share. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I was talking to Nikki last week. It's like, as long as people start asking questions so that we can, you're so welcome, Deborah, to ask questions so that I can customize what we're sharing, because most of the time, otherwise I'm just sharing theories and generic solutions without, easy reference. Okay. So, you are also very welcome. Thank you so much. I enjoyed this a lot. Okay, cool. And so other than that, that's it for this week. So if you have any other questions, I think Nikki says, whenever you guys have any questions throughout the week, or if there's a topic that you guys want me to address next Monday, just go ahead and let her know, and then she can pass that
Great.
information on.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Great. Thanks. Bye.